Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our presentation of Year 2 Fatwa that Hassan, John, and I have completed in the course mainly of last year with some additional work this year to make it nice and sweet. And which we shared with you guys yesterday in the group chat for Year 2, Usul al-Fiqh, Principles of Islamic Law, according to the teachings of Sayyid Mahdi Imam Razvi, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Yesterday was actually his 10th anniversary date of passing to Akhirat, so we did a little ziyarat here in Hamburg, and if you look in our Hawza chat, you can maybe see some pictures if you're interested in that. Alayhi salam. I want to jump into the document, so let me just share the screen. And is this the one? Yeah, that's the one. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Alhamdulillah. So, of course, you're familiar with this layout from the previous Year 1 classes, and I'll be happy to share the layout with you, and then all you have to really do, because the structure is always the same, okay? And I think we should start with the structure of the fatwa or the ijtihad. And then what I'll do is just share you, I think I shared the PDF, then I'll share you also the document, the Word document, so you can basically keep a similar structure so you don't have to reinvent the structure every time. Maybe it's easier for you, yeah? But I do want you to understand what the structure of a fatwa is. So the idea, I mean, everything that you guys have been working toward this year with Hassan John as your great teacher has been to discuss the, there's Rocco, he's joining. That's excellent, okay. So has been to basically look at a question, okay, take a question of Islamic law. Maybe somebody's asking a question about artificial intelligence. Maybe someone is using a question about mRNA vaccines. Maybe someone is asking a question about space travel. You know, are these things halal in Islam, and how should these things be shaped in order to become halal if they're not 100% halal already? These kind of futuristic kind of questions, you know, we should be able to answer. Why? Because the questions of the past were answered in the past, okay? The questions of a moment were answered in their moment, okay? And therefore, Islamic law must present that. The questions of this moment must be answered in this moment, not in the past, and not in some glorious golden age or something, but this should be our golden age, and the future should become our golden age once again, inshallah. Okay, so with this perspective, we have to have, of course, we need to have a jurisprudence which actually meets the needs and demands of today, okay? Not 1,400 years ago, not 1,300 years ago, okay? But now, yeah? And of course, the world is changing faster than ever before, so things are not only changing, but they're changing more quickly, okay? So there's an acceleration, if you will. There's an acceleration in how fast everything is changing, okay? So law and jurisprudence, they have to keep up with the change, the same pace, because otherwise the law is always behind. So like, for example, the internet came out, there was no law, okay? Then the law would caught up. Then the mRNA vaccines came out, there was no law, then a law came out. You know, now there are a lot of discussions about artificial intelligence is going forward. There's still no law, okay? So there's always a lagging time between the development of a phenomenon in society, okay, and how fast the law can catch up, yeah? This is normal. This is not to say that, you know, because normally, you know, law and governments and policy is reactive. It's not proactive normally, and it's okay. Normally, let's say 80% or 90% of the time, law is reactive instead of being proactive. In other words, you know, law does not create artificial intelligence. You know, law does not create space travel. Law does not create renewable energy, okay? Law does not create hydrogen heating, okay? Law does not create, you know, drone technology and these things. Yeah. So these things are created by human beings, and then law regulates them to guide these developments in certain direction. Okay. So it's normal that law is mainly reactive and not necessarily proactive. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But the lag time should not be too much behind. Yeah. Like we Muslims, if you look at the general state of the Ummah, if you ask me personally, if you just take the big picture and reflect a little bit, in the big picture of the Ummah, we are very, very far behind. I mean, we're like almost 1,000 years behind, or 1,400 year behind. Some of the madhahib, unfortunately, like the Wahhabis, they want to bring everything back to the time of the Sahaba, alayhum assalam ajmain. Okay, this is crazy thinking, yeah, because you cannot legislate now the same way that you could legislate then. It's impossible to practice jurisprudence in this way. And that's why we Muslims tend to be behind on many developments, if you look around the world. Or we start to leave Islam and become more secularized in order to catch up with the development, okay? So like now what you're seeing in Saudi Arabia is that MBS, he's taking a distance toward his clerics, because his ulama are very much, how can I say, they're very much stuck back in the time of the Sahaba and these things, okay? So he cannot rely on them to make progress. But what's he doing? He's making new irrigation plan, new kind of a big city, opening up, the pilgrimage also for Shia, which is the first time this has happened in like hundreds of years in Saudi Arabia, to allow Shia pilgrims to visit the graves of Imam Hassan, Hazrat Khadija, alayhum assalam ajma'in, and so on and so forth. Imam Baqir, Imam Jafar, Imam Zainul Abidin, and so on, alayhum assalam ajma'in. And so these changes are happening, but MBS, he has to move away from Islam to get there, But that's not what we want. We want to be able to kind of go hand in hand with the development of progress, at the same time, the development of Islamic law, okay? So that Islamic law does not become some kind of a relic in a museum, but everything that we do is somehow shaped by Islamic law. Why is this important? Why we need Islamic law? We can just live secular lives and, just don't do zina and don't steal and don't kill and kind of live a normal life. Also, it's fine, yeah? Don't drink and all these things. Okay, no problem. You can live like this 90% of the time. The reason we do that is because with every new development on the curve, there's also an ethical and philosophical component, okay? And let's take artificial intelligence. On the one hand, it's a great tool, okay, for, alleviating many tasks, okay, but not finishing your final thesis, because your final thesis and your work for this fatwa has to be done by you, okay? Not by the artificial intelligence, inshallah. But it is a help, okay? It is a help for these kind of tasks, but on the other hand, many people are afraid that, people in the government are afraid they might lose their easy job, or people like at telephone centers, or, many of these kind of tasks that can be done somewhat by artificial intelligence are afraid that they lose their job, okay? So there is a conflict, and this ethical conflict, if we are Muslims, we should apply ethics according to our framework of ethics, okay? Now, what is our framework of ethics? That's something that, we try to explore in this class as well, of jurisprudence, why something is halal and why something is haram, okay? That's what we're doing here. And we obviously go deeper in this, as we did it last year already when we looked at the Usul ad-Din, the principles of Islam, and we do it again. Next course is Islamic philosophy for those who want to join, inshallah. And then we also have a class on Irfaniyat, inshallah. So which is like Sufism, okay, like mysticism. So in philosophy and mysticism, we go deeper into the ethics that shape our daily lives, okay? So I don't say that you cannot have ethics without religion. Yes, you can. You can have a secular set of ethics, and these can be very good ethics, okay? But in the same way, you can have a set of ethics and values and morals that are being shaped by the Islamic perspective. And that's a very beautiful perspective. And especially you can see it from the development of Arab society before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and after. the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you see the big development of Islamic ethics and philosophy, and it should be the ethics and philosophy that shape the law, okay? So this is the main thing I want to focus on. Our jurisprudence should be kind of soaked in ethics and philosophy, okay? Not the other way around. Well, I have this law, so, you know, why I shouldn't drink, you know? No, it should be, if you drink alcohol, you might become violent, or you might say things that you afterward become sad, or you might cause an accident driving. And so for all of these negative effects, we think that the law in the Quran, which kind of in different steps kind of forbid to drink alcohol, we think this law is still valid today, okay? 1,400 years later, wallahu a'lam, okay? So it should come from the philosophical reflection, and all of the criteria that we've discussed this year and the methodology of creating the fatwa should come from higher level of ethics and philosophy and spirituality, okay? This is what I'm trying to mainly teach in this class, and Hassan Jan is trying to teach you guys in this class, okay? Is that the law itself should be like the fruit of philosophy and mysticism should be the law, okay? Many people think that the law is like the roots of the tree, and then, you know, the branches are like maybe the philosophy, and maybe the fruits are like the Sufism, or like the tasawwuf, or like the irfaniyat. But we kind of think it's the other way around. We think actually the spirituality is the root, okay? And the branches, okay, are still the philosophy, and the fruit is actually the law, okay? And this means that the existential reality of how we're living our lives is actually the fruit of the reflection, of the inner reflection of how we are as human beings on a spiritual level and on a philosophical level, okay? Okay, you can look at it this way, that way. This is a big discussion, but this is just to show you how deeply interlinked, you know, spirituality and philosophy are with the Islamic law, inshallah, wallahu la'ala, okay? That's the big picture. And any questions about that so far? Let me just stop for 1 second. Anyone comment or question? If none, I'll just proceed. You can also ask at the end of the class today, but you can also ask in between. Anytime you want to ask a question, just go ahead and ask, okay? So what I'm going to show you very quickly is just the structure of what a fatwa or an ijtihad looks like. Very quickly, what's the difference between a fatwa and an ijtihad? The main difference, maybe Hassan Jan already talked about it, otherwise I'm happy to quickly just remind you of this, okay? The difference is that a fatwa is that you judge a case based on Islamic law that already exists, okay? In other words, there's already, either there's a precedence, a nazair, or there's really a law, like there's maybe a sunnat, or you can find it in the Quran. There's a set of hukuk, and these hukuk are resolved by the qanun, and this is already settled in either the Quran or the Sunnah or the ijma of the Ahlul Bayt and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, this is when you have this background already for something like, let's say, stealing, or for something like, you know, causing an accident by drinking alcohol, or zina, or these kind of things. Already there's a precedence, and maybe there's a fatwa to discuss some incident that happened, you know, based on this precedence or on this already existing law. The ijtihad, on the other hand, is when there is no law, okay? Like in these areas, like, for example, artificial intelligence, maybe space travel, maybe mRNA vaccines, you know, different kinds of technologies, interrelations maybe with, you know, different worldviews, philosophical worldviews, these kind of things that we haven't experienced yet. Whenever you go into new areas, like we were talking about at the beginning, this is then where there is no, you know, explicit mention in the Quran and the Sunnah and in the ijma of the Ahlul Bayt, then this is where we talk about an ijtihad, okay? Now, this is a very, let's say, binary explanation of the differences. Sometimes there's some gray areas. You know, we don't have to go into all that today, but I just want you to get feeling a little bit what's the difference between a fatwa and an ijtihad, inshallah. Okay. Let's go into the structure of the fatwa. So let's say that someone was going to ask you a question, okay? Now you guys are free. I'm sure Hassan John has told you already how the exercise will be, but anyway, you are all free as a group to kind of decide what kind of, you know, question you would like to answer. So let me just make up a question, okay? I think there was a question about nuclear dogs or something that Hussein was asking last year. I don't really remember the nuclear reactive dogs, yeah? So let's say that, you know, somebody wants to keep a nuclear reactive dog in their house, okay? Now, can I find in the Quran and the Sunnah, can I find an example of a nuclear reactive dog? No, I cannot, okay? So I need to put some work in and I need to think, is this a fatwa or an ijtihad? Probably it will be an ijtihad, okay? So what I do, I start with the question itself, okay? And the question, surprisingly, the question, you might be surprised by this, but the question is actually the most fundamental and important part of the legal case study, okay, of the fatwa or the ijtihad, okay? In this case, it would be an ijtihad. And it's the most fundamental because how you shape the question will guide how to respond to the question, okay? In other words, I can shape the question this way, or I can shape the question this way, okay? I can shape the question this way, or I can shape the question this way, okay? So how I, in a sense, manipulate the question is going to strongly affect the outcome of the fatwa or the ijtihad, in other words, of the legal jurisprudence, okay? We had a pretty complex subject last year with Hassan John, and what we did is we looked at the COVID-19 pandemic, which was still kind of critical back in 2021, okay, which everyone now forgot because we're busy with the Russian-Ukrainian war and all these other inflation and everything else, artificial intelligence, okay? But it was quite complex situation, and it was also, you know, economically quite complex, and a lot of countries, as we say here, during the COVID-19 pandemic, nations across the globe experienced various levels of severe economic recession, okay? So for taming the macroeconomic impact in industry and commerce, et cetera, many of these nations drafted and implemented supersized macroeconomic subvention programs for small businesses, individual freelancers, and perhaps also larger industry players, commercial sectors, and the poorer levels of society, okay, within their nation. So the question is going to be, and we're going to shape it here, is, you know, what are the side effects of these huge, you know, lending programs? If you follow the news a little bit, you know, okay, the government votes to allocate, you know, 15 billion euro or lek, or whatever the currency is, for, you know, alleviating poverty because of the pandemic, helping small businesses because of the pandemic and these things. I'm sure you've all seen these kind of news, yeah? And but it's not like you can just go to the bank and just say, okay, just write me a check. It's like in our daily life, no? If you go to the bank and you take a loan, let's say you want to buy a car or you want to buy a house, okay, you have to pay that back, no? And if you buy a house, for example, sometimes you have to pay back 20 years or 25 years or even longer, yeah? So this is a big step to take debt, no? But in our society, it just becomes kind of normal that, you know, a new government is elected every 4 years and they kind of approve a budget, and then suddenly there are all these kind of macroeconomic programs, and lots of them have to do with lending money from external banks or printing money from the European Central Government, for the European Central Bank, excuse me, and, you know, quantitative easing, as they used to call it, and flooding the markets with a lot of money. Well, that has impact, right? So of course, that has the impact that, you know, for short term, you help the small businesses and you help maybe the poorer parts of society, and maybe you support some industries and these kind of things. That's very good. but there's also midterm inflation. A lot of what we're experiencing now, all the prices are going up. And people think that, you know, the prices are going up because of the war with Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, that's part of the reason. But the other part of the reason is that we've been flooding the money markets for years with either quantitative easing or with zero interest credits or with these kind of, you know, pandemic related lending programs. Okay. So that's a reason that the inflation is also, it's a huge reason why the inflation is going up. Yeah. And of course, the question is, what about the long-term governmental debt situation of future taxpayer generations? So what are we doing when we do these huge lending programs? What are we passing on to our children or to our grandchildren? Okay, so we should be thinking about all these things. They never teach it at school, okay? And they never really teach it very accurately at the university either. So very few people understand these topics. But these are some of the most important topics that shape our macroeconomic understanding of how society works. Okay, so to make a long story short, we took this question and made it into a case study, and we asked ourselves, from an Islamic perspective, is it halal for a government to draw down these huge interest-based credits from the profit-driven global banks for short-term resolutions of apparently desperate economic crises, taking into account both the midterm inflation and the strong indebtedness of the future generations? Okay, so in other words, Hassan and I, we put a lot of time into correctly formulating the question. Okay, so the question is short, but it's sweet. Okay, it's understandable. You can understand how the question is, and it leads us in a direction to apply Islamic ethics and philosophy and spirituality through the channel of jurisprudence, inshallah. Okay, so that's how to shape a question. Okay, so whatever question you might ask, it might be about the nuclear dogs. Okay, it might be about AI, it might be about, you know, space travel. Whatever question you ask, just make sure that you take the time to phrase the question properly. Okay, because that will have a big impact. Of course, there are some sources here, you know, so we're not just somehow freely making things up, but we have sources and articles that you can refer to. Okay, that's the structure of the case study. Then we go into the methodology, which is the second part. And of course, we talk about, you know, the teachings of Imam Razvi alayhi salam. Now, of course, if you go to the Hanafi school and you learn fiqh, they'll teach you one way. If you go to the Shafi'i school, they'll teach you another way. The Jafari school, another way. So we're teaching you, in fact, we're teaching you to be independent of all of that. Okay, because the way that Imam Razvi taught was, this is the Zaydi fiqh that I learned, in other words, that he learned, and that he passes on to us, okay? But he also says that if you don't agree with some of the criteria or their order in succession, you know, you have to criticize that. In other words, this is not like spoon feeding a child, okay? And I would say this is requiring that we act as adults, like mature adults, with a certain level of education and capacity to understand these questions. And this is asking that you guys think for yourselves, basically, okay? And for the main part, that's why he's asking, you know, us to be critical about, you know, which criteria are important and what should be their order, okay? If you guys can put on your cameras, I'm a little bit more happy just to make sure that you guys are with us. That's great. It's good to see you. It's good to see lovely faces. Very good. So in the general, yeah, great to see you guys. So in the general, anything that, in fact, it applies to anything that we teach. I mean, anything that we teach, please be critical of it, okay? Think for yourselves. We are trying to grow free-thinking human beings here, okay? We are not trying to be, you know, the guru and the little students and, you know, bow down to the guru and touch the feet of the sheikh and all this stuff. This is not our path, okay? Never did Imam Razvi accept that I kissed his hand and none of this stuff, okay? It was always handshake and a little hug, and that was it. Like two human beings, okay? So anything I teach you is like two human beings. Anything that Hassan teaches you is like two human beings. Anything that maybe you teach someone in the future is like two human beings, okay? Even your children, if you teach them, it should be like two human beings, okay? Of course, they're children and you're papa, okay? But still, you should try to teach them the deep things in life, just like on the same level, inshallah, okay? And this is how we try to teach here also. Inshallah, wallahu la. So criticize, I mean, think about the things. I think you've now gone through the practice of shura and ijma in the group, and you've kind of more or less agreed on the order of the criteria, or you're very close. I'm not sure. Hassan, can you remind me, do you have the final list now, or are you still working on it?
Yes, we have the final list.
Okay, you had good discussions in the group?
So to finish the final list, it took us 4 houses with common time of 10 hours, 10 astronomical hours, because it was very lively discussed.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. That's very good. Okay. I'm happy to hear. This is how it should be. Yeah? It should be engaging, and it should be on some level it should be a little bit of work, yeah, and a little bit of effort, and sometimes a little bit of tension, because people are very proud of their ideas, as they should be, and sometimes someone else is proud of an idea, so you have to have a good debate, and then finally you have to decide in a consensus, yeah? But don't be too proud, but don't be lazy either, okay? So between being lazy and between being too proud, like crazy proud, let's say, there's a balanced middle ground, okay? But you should be proud of your ideas, yeah? Because it's your idea, and you should be proud to bring it, okay? So this is the methodology, and of course we start with the Quran and the Sunnah and the ijma of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim assalam ajma'in, okay? Of course, we should look at all of these through the divine lens of aql, in other words, divine reason or divine intelligence, okay? As Ibn Arabi called it, and as Mullah Sadra also picked up on it, Sadruddin Shirazi, some famous philosophers in Islam that maybe next year, if you join us for next academic year, if you join us for Islamic philosophy, inshallah, we'll be very happy to discuss these philosophers and their thoughts. But certainly, divine intelligence is also an idea of the Mu'tazila and also of Imam Zayd alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt, really. So access to divine intelligence should be the lens through which we read the Quran and the Sunnah and understand the Sunnah and the Ijma, inshallah. Okay, and then all the remaining criteria derive from those criteria. So if we talk about istislah, if we talk about istihsan, or all of these tools that we learn later, they all somehow come from istidlal. They all come from these core criteria. Either they're from the Quran, or they're from the Sunnah, or they're from the Ijma, okay? Hassan had the nice idea that we do a class called Usul al-Fiqh, which does exist in certain universities where they teach advanced Islamic law. It's another class, maybe for another day. It's a very deep module, okay? But certainly the main thing is that this is nothing that we've invented ourselves, but this comes directly, everything from Quran and the Sunnah, okay?
Actually, my idea was not for a separate class, but just in the second year lessons, when we present the different principles, just let's say took 5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes, to show where this principle lies in the Quran.
Wonderful. That's fine. I think it's wonderful. Let's do that then. So let's do that. Let's see if we can do that. I'll leave that to you guys if you want to do that, okay? And if you want me to join you in this process, I'm happy to join you. And if you're happy to, manage it in the group, guys, you can manage it yourselves, okay? But certainly you will find like a thing like istihsan. I mean, how many times the word ihsan or husna or these words, just this root word ha, si, noon, come up in the Quran, okay? Or the subject of dalil in the Quran, or dalail, okay, in the plural, okay? So how many times you can find all these things in the Quran, yeah? Just the Quran itself, without talking about Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad and the Ahlul Bayt, okay? So great. If you're welcome to explore that, and we can certainly discuss it. Now, some other things, remember, you're forbidden to simply accept these criteria without critically revising them, okay? So that means you are expected to be critical, okay? Said Imam Razvi alayhi salam. Now, before we jump into the different criteria, last year we also came up with some core principles. I don't know if you did the same process this year or you didn't. It's up to you. I'm excited that you show me later. But in last year's class, we did actually come up with some core principles, la ikraha fi din, so there's no compulsion in religion. You know, you cannot take this list without thinking critically. We talked about that already. And we value ijtihad in the present moment with a view to the future, and we limit our ijtihad or our fatwa to the present moment and to a certain local context. So what works for me in Hamburg, Germany might not work for you in Sofia, Bulgaria, and it might not work for someone else in Saudi or in Singapore or in Brazil. Okay, so we always have to look at, if we do an ijtihad or if we do some fatawa, that they should be applicable, limited to the space that they're in. Okay, if the fatwa happens to be valid for the whole world, that's totally fine, but it might not be valid for travel to the moon. Okay, so there's always a limitation of context, inshallah. Okay. Apply aql at all times. We talked about it. Apply shura, including external expertise as required. In other words, a subject like economy, like we're doing now, maybe Hassan and I are not the experts. I happen to have some economic background, but maybe, you're in a group of mullahs or somehow ulama, and they don't have the expertise. Then they should go find it, no? I mean, this is the problem with most so-called Islamic governments, is that they think they can do everything themselves. These mullahs or these kind of ulama, these guys with the huge turbans and the big bushy beards, and they think they can do everything themselves, when in reality they have no idea. They have no idea about technology, they have no idea about economics, they have no idea about science, they have no idea about mathematics or architecture or arts or music or language. They have no idea, but still they're taking decisions. This can only happen in Islam, only in Islam you find this, that there are judges who are taking decisions on things that they have absolutely no idea about, but they think that they know, So that's why you have these mullahs and these problems, No. Go and get external expertise. Find the people that know what they're talking about. Submit yourself to their guidance. Incorporate their guidance in your legislation, and you can find a balance and a harmony, inshallah. And the main thing is that you can keep Islamic law to be relevant, okay? Because who wants to listen to mullahs that have no idea what they're talking about, okay? This becomes annoying, And as society become more and more and more educated, this becomes increasingly annoying, to have to deal with these guys. And the gap, and sometimes it turns out that the population knows more about the subject than the mullahs that are taking the judgment, But now I have a mullah who's judging on my life. Maybe I'm like working in agriculture, and I'm applying some genetically modified substance, to grow at a faster pace, or graft a new kind of hybrid vegetable, like something between a carrot and a pear, okay? And I have this great vegetable called the carrot pear, okay, which is like a cross between a carrot and a pear, and it's been scientifically proven to be healthy, and it's been scientifically shown how to grow it in the ground and everything. And then the mullah says it's haram. Okay, why it's haram? Because the Prophet didn't do it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, what does that mean, the Prophet didn't do it? The Prophet didn't have the choice to do it. He didn't have the opportunity to do it. He didn't have the opportunity to eat genetically modified food or grow it. So how could he know? But no, if you have the access on the carrot pear, okay, to speak with the biologists, the molecular biologists or the genetic biologists, the geneticists, and the agriculture experts, and the economic experts, what kind of economic impact will this have? Then you have to get this expertise before you take the fatwa on whether growing the carrot pear, genetically modified, is halal or haram. You cannot just say the Prophet didn't do it, so it's haram, okay? Now, obviously, I'm taking a very simplified example and putting it in a black and white window, but I'm just expressing to you the problem of a lot of issues that we have today with Shariat. And why also, on the other hand, Islamic law has become kind of sleepy, okay? Because nobody's really asking the Muslims anymore what they think, or no one is asking us anymore, what does Islamic jurisprudence say to a certain question, or what do the Muslims think about a certain development? Okay, we're not even asking ourselves, yeah. And if we ask ourselves outside of Islam. We don't ask ourselves inside of Islam, okay? But we should be going with Islam, of course, in every breath and every step we take, inshallah. So get the external expertise, okay? And incorporate it, inshallah. Wallahu lana. Any questions so far on the theoretical methodology? Okay, if this is all easy so far, then or understood, then or you can ask later at the end of the class, of course. Yeah, I kind of want you guys to ask at least 2 questions. So at least by the end of the class, you have to ask at least 2 questions. Not everyone, but some 2 guys ask at least 2 questions. Inshallah, if you can.
I cannot be more agreed with you and with all of what you're saying, what I can say.
Good enough, good enough. Okay, that's fine. But maybe now when we go deeper into the Alhamdulillah, mashallah. So thank you, St. John. So I mean,
And this is said from the guy who do not agree with anything. So if he says to you he completely agrees with you, that is
that's pretty unique. Okay, that's pretty unique.
miraculously.
So I think we have to give the Hussein the prize of the golden nuclear dog. Okay, so Hussein gets the prize of the golden nuclear dog today. Very good. Thank you very much. I'm glad you appreciate. Okay, so but think about some questions to ask later on, because now we do go and dive into the detail, and actually we go into the criteria and we look at the question that we had before, and I'll just quickly remind, from an Islamic perspective, is it halal for a government to draw down large volumes of interest rate credit from profit-driven banks for short-term resolutions of desperate economic crises like the pandemic, like COVID-19, taking into account both the midterm inflation and the indebtment of future generations? This was the question. And I'd like to now hand over to Hassan John, because he did a really great and deep study of the Quran. I would also say that Hassan last year proposed some, he took the criteria and he broke it down into 3 different categories. One is called manifestation of law, which starts with the Quran, of course, at the very top. So Hassan, why don't I put myself now on mute and you go ahead and take over the discussion, please. Bismillah.
Okay, so then directly starting with the first principle, what we used from the Quran Karim. I will proceed directly to the general discussion. When you have government, and this government needs money to spend, and when the money comes from, because the question we have here in the ijtihad, in the case of crisis, is it allowed for the government to take loans, which loans possibly could adapt the further generations? But let's say if the government initially had enough money, there would be no need for making the loan at all. So we started with the foundation of the whole thing. Okay, so which are the sources government derives money from to do its activities for the population or for the country as a whole, but taken from Islamic perspective? Or let's say, put simply, in the contemporary situation, in the times when we live, for nowadays country or state, can this state have enough funding from sources which are Quranic, which are mentioned in Quran. And so, roughly, the sources from which we can very simply and roughly, in resume, we mentioned we can find the institution of zakat, also of ghanima, fay, sadaqah, and awqaf. What are these things? There are different sources from which, let's say, the Khalifa in the classical case, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his time, he was gathering money, and after that, he was spending the money to the groups of population. We need this money, or put in a simple words, that's where the money he used to finance the Islamic State or the Islamic country. So, zakat, the first thing which was mentioned, it was zakat. You know what's the meaning of zakat. Then we have also ghanima. The meaning of ghanima, as we will see further, it is understood differently in the different Islamic schools. In the Sunni schools as a whole, generally, ghanima is considered when you have battle between the two sides. Ghanima, it is the booty or the wealth which is took from the defeated side by the once more time, I will ask you to mute your microphones to not have. So it is the wealth which is took from the side which is defeated. That is the Sunni interpretation. But the Shia interpretation is that ghanima, it is every thing which you have earned, every profit you have, ghanima, you should pay about it. So the portion of ghanima, it is 1/5 of the income. That is the Shia interpretation. The fay, it is again what is took from the defeated side, but without having a battle. And the Quranic hukum or judgment about ghanima, that all of it, 100% goes to the directly, let's say, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the Khalifa, or let's say the government, and so on. We will to the ruler, let's say, and he then redistributes the fay. And the difference with the ghanima is what you have earned. So 4/5 of it, 80% from it is for you. It stays for you, what you have earned. But 20% of it, 1/5, it is given, let's say, to the Prophet or to the Khalif or the ruler, and so on. That is the difference between fay and ghanima. And the other difference is ghanima, according to the Shia interpretation, it is considered every profit you have for your business or from your job and so on. But within the Sunnis, ghanima is considered only that wealth which is took after battle from the defeated side. About fay, there is no difference between the different schools. All of them considered what is taken from the defeated side after battle. The other source, it is sadaqah, which you are giving by your will. It is not obligation upon you, at least technically. And awqaf or waqf, or we are saying it in our language, they are the different institutions which are founded with some purpose, with some specific purpose. It could be awqaf or waqf, which is to support the mosque or the masjid, or it could be vakuf or awqaf, which purpose is to support the people who are studying, or it can have very different any purpose for which it is founded. So these are 5 different categories. Now, when we have with this general introduction, can we run government in our times using these sources? And we are first, the question arises for country in our time, what amount of taxes from the citizens, for example, roughly it should take to be enough for it to run the whole country? Because if you have, let's say, percent of taxes, which or again, in the Bulgarian word, I don't know the English, donaty. Do you know how it is in English?
Taxes.
Yes, it is taxes. If we set it very low, let's say 1% or 2%, it would be not enough to manage all the activities you are supposed to manage as for social activities, for the different categories of people, for different kind of for pensions, for schools, for healthcare, and so on. On the other side, if you set it very high, let's say half on the income, you give it to the government takes from you, then what is left for you? Again, it is another extreme. So how it is set in the Islamic framework? And when we start one by one, can we use zakat for financial government? So the very, very short answer in our case, it is no, for 2 reasons. The first reason, it is only 2.5%, and it is very low as a tax. But the second reason, which is the main reason, is it is that by the Sharia, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have said specifically that this zakat should be given directly to 8 categories of people. The zakat should be given directly to the person who needs it. You're giving the money to the person, and this person, he uses the money whatever way he wants, and it is established by ijma. So the government cannot use the money of zakat, for example, to build mosque, or to build school, or to build hospital, or all of the other activities that it is supposed that the government should do. Then we'll skip the ghanime to the end. We proceed to the sadaqah. The sadaqah, it is also not useful because the sadaqah, it is something you are giving by your will. And it is a government cannot make an obligation upon you to give a sadaqah. You decide whom you will be giving the sadaqah to and how much sadaqah. So it also it is not suitable for financial financing the government. The next one, which is the awqaf or wakaf, they let's say they are not government institution. They are something like a private organization which are run by a specific group of people for a very specific purpose. So in this sense, awqaf are also not very suitable to finance a whole government. The next one, which is fay, it is all to 100% of it goes to the government, but it basically means that to run your country, you should be always waging some war against
Well, in
someone.
fact, you should always be walking into empty cities, right? Because the Fay
Yes.
is without the war, right? So you just walk into a city and you take the city. There's no resistance, there's no war. So there's all the money, yeah? But as Hassan is saying, I mean, there's never a case like this nowadays, basically, yeah.
And the last resort we have, it is the ghanima. And again, if we take the Sunni interpretation of ghanima, even then it would be not suitable because ghanima, it comes after the battle. But according to the Shia interpretation, which us consider very good interpretation, because the ayah says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّمَا خُمُسَهُ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ. Know well that everything from which we profit, min shay'in, from anything, it is not specific for cases of battles or war. That from everything you have profited from, then 1/5, 20% from it, it is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for his messenger, for the needy, and so on. That is, you should give 20% from it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other part, 80%, it is left for you. Then we are using, according to this interpretation, in the current situation for a contemporary modern state, if the financial plan, or let's say the economic experts which are running the country, they are good expert, 20%, it's a good portion we can use to finance and to run the whole country. So that was the framework we choose to put our ijtihad in.
So if I may just thank you so much, Hassan Jan. So just a quick comment on this, a couple of comments. So ghanima, we have a translation here which says spoils of war. So obviously this is a strong Sunni translation, okay?
Yes, exactly.
So maybe we have to think about, you know, how, if we were to translate the verse, you know, how would we translate it, and what would be our linguistic translation for this? But this is the Sunni kind of translation. But as Hassan John already said, if we were to accept ghanima as a kind of a 20% on all of the efforts that have been made, or as Hassan mentioned, shay'in, everything that we gain or earn or profit by, then suddenly you have, you know, an economic system that within itself is 100% derived from the Quran. And it's actually quite a fair system because it means for everyone 20%, okay? So sometimes in Germany we have these, you know, economic discussions where some liberal politicians, economically liberal, I should say, conservative liberal, economically liberal politicians say, you know, I want to be able to, you know, have a tax system where everyone can file their taxes on a small piece of paper, okay? So this would be a system like that, where you would basically just say, look, 20% of everything you earned, it's off to the government, okay? And the government can do with this money what they want to do with it, okay? Or what they're, more specifically, what the people in a democratic government, what the people have elected them to do. Or if it's like a king and this, then, you know, what the king and his advisors think are the most sensible for the country. But nowadays, we almost have all over the world some kind of democratic representation, okay? Which is good. So, yeah, so this becomes like a replacement of any other taxation that you might have. So once you have the ghanima and you apply it as 20%, you don't need to kind of collect another tax here, value-added tax here, gasoline tax here, farmer's tax here, pick your nose tax here, and scratch your hair tax over here, okay? You don't need these other taxes, okay? You're just taking 20% for everything, and the 2.5% on the zakat, okay? The 2.5 being applicable, obviously, above the nisab, okay, above the level of wealth that are necessary to make zakat applicable, okay? That's one point. I just wanted to quickly add to what Hussein was, what Hassan Jan was explaining. And what we should also think about is where we could spend the ghanima. On what could we spend the ghanima? Okay, theoretically, it's different from zakat because zakat, you have to spend it on very specific categories according to ijma,
Yes,
according
excuse me,
to
Sheikh.
a analogy or a qiyas that has been made from sadaqah, okay? But the ghanima can be freely spent by the government in place, and I'm sure that Hassan Jan will explain it now in more detail. Go ahead.
Yes, just in one sentence, I forgot to say that for zakat in the Quran, we have the groups of people you should spend on, but the ghanima, the freedom is given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or his representative to spend this 20% the way he thinks it is the best possible way.
Perfect, Hassan Jan, perfect. Would you like to continue, please?
Okay, that was the first thing. But now we have another very big problem. Okay, all these things, zakat, ghanima, fay, and the others, in the ayat, it is said that they are for the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, but in our time, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, even he is with us with his soul, but we are not with him by his body. He passed to the akhirah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the big discussion comes. Okay, who is the valid representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Or it could be argued also that no one could be a representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and this was no one can be in his role for the central figure, and everyone should save himself individually. So what was our discussion in the topic? Again, the different Islamic schools here in the document who may collect the funds. And also the second point, where the legitimacy of this people or institution comes from, how it is understood by the different schools. In the Zaydi and the Zaydi Shias and Ismaili Shias, they are different from all the rest of Islamic schools, including they are different from the Ithna Ashari Shias. And what they are more special with, they have the living imam amongst them, or at least they are supposed to have the living imam among them. And their imam, he is in the position of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he is the person who is taking care of the whole country. He is gathering the funds, and then he is spending, and he is the central authority in one sentence. So that is the way the problem, who is the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it is solved, it is within the Zaydi and the Ismaili framework. Then among the Ithna Ashari Shias, who is the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? They are the 12 Imams alayhimus salam. And the 12th Imam, he is Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. But the problem is the following: Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, according to their doctrines, he is in ghaib, he is in occultation. He do not hold direct physical contact with his followers. So the question is here: okay, in this situation, how let's say how we will government a whole country, or who will be the leader of our society, who is taking the practical part. And the result of our discussion was that the so-called merjia of taqlid, so how we will translate it into English?
Yeah, I mean, you
Merjia.
can say, you know, the big imams of the Jafari school or of the 12er Shia, you know, which they call marja, you know, they're collecting khums also. So really all of the Shia are collecting khums.
No, my point, I was trying to explain the role of merjia for to be understood from, let's say, people who came from a Sunni background.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like marja is like a kind of imam, if you will, in a similar sense that that maybe a Sufi Shaykh might be the leader of his community. Also, the marja are leader of their community, and they have their followers. Yeah, so everyone that follows, for example, Sheikh Nazim was the very famous Turkish Cypriot Naqshbandi Sheikh in the last generation. So you know, he had a huge global following of some millions of Muslims were following Sheikh Nazim, yeah? So in a similar way, you know, Ali Sistani living in Iraq is maybe the greatest marja today, and he maybe has the largest following, some millions of followers all over the world are following Ali Sistani, alayhi salam, and paying the khums, yeah? So I think that's maybe a similar comparison, if you will, yeah?
Yes, so they are, let's say, the spiritual and religious leaders who are very famous and very respected by very big numbers of Shias, and they are playing this role of the leader who takes gathers the money and then who spends them with the help of his assistants to the people who are in need, the way the most suitable way he is capable to do it. Okay. And in the third case of the Sunni schools, with no difference, Hanafis, Malikis, Shafis, Hanbalis, even Wahhabi, here it is the same problem. Who is the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam? Put that Sunni do not believe in infallible imams, in imams who are divinely, let's say, guided and who are sinless the same way the Prophet ﷺ are. And so the Sunni solution, it is not, I would say it is not so much solution as much as it is a historical development of the events that the Khalif, he is the one who is in the role of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But what are the what is needed to be Khalif? You are not expected to be scholar. You are not expected to be even righteous person. The only condition is that you have enough strength to defeat your opponents and to be the most powerful politically, and that is considered the legitimate Khalif. That is
Yeah, this is a big difference
framework.
between the Sunni and the Shia schools in general, and but it's interesting to mention this because if we talk about Ghanima, of course, no Sunni government or no majority Sunni government would ever accept Ghanimat the way that the Shia Marja'i and the Imams would accept it. However, what we're trying to say is that the interpretation of the Quran, of the ayat, as Hassan Jan was mentioning, of Ghanimat for all income tax is really applicable to any school of Islam. It's not about Sunni and Shia, yeah? It's just about thinking about it. What does the Quran actually say? And how could it be applied in today's age, okay? So in reality, there's no reason to have a whole set of secular taxes in a government, and then you have this little tax on zakat if you want, and usually zakat is not collected properly and it's not distributed properly, and it's definitely not done by the governments, okay? What we are suggesting is that you could roll out an entire government macroeconomic policy on the basis of the Quran. You could do this even today, okay? If you included ghanimat as your kind of operative income tax, okay? And corporate tax for the corporations, okay? You could certainly put together enough money to run a government budget, okay? So this is just an exercise, if you will, in showing what resources the Quran has to create a modern and future kind of macro economy based on Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the ijma of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam ajma'in. So you might ask yourself, well, what's the point of talking about Sunni Islam when anyway they don't accept ghanimat, yeah? But it's not about Sunni Islam and Shia Islam. It's just about how to properly apply the term ghanimat and how we could derive a macro economy based on Islamic jurisprudence.
So the long story made short, why we are discussing all these differences. So, and what relevance it has to our day. So it is very relevant because we are now putting the question, okay, in our days, who is the legitimate representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who should run the country and who should put in very competent, let's say, financial experts to manage the funds the best possible way. And so, again, the answer could be given within the Ismailis, the so-called Agha Khan, who is their imam. It is the Ismaili community. They are a very good example how they manage their, let's say, community very well. Because the Agha Khan, he is gathering the ghanime. The ghanime of all of the Ismailis, it is paid to the Agha Khan, and the Agha Khan with different institutions, let's say the Agha Khan Development Network or the very different projects, they are using their money to help the Ismailis all over the world, and not all also to help them, but to look at the future, to fund the different learning institutions. For example, the most famous, they are saying the contemporary Azhar, which the Ismailis found before 1,000 years in Egypt. It is in our time the Ismaili Study Institute in the London, and so on. So that is their answer for the current situation. Yes, we have the imam, and our imam, he is managing our activities very well.
So whatever you think of the Aga Khan, you know, I have my opinions about the Aga Khan. I won't say them now, but whatever you may think of him, okay, definitely they're very efficient in collecting ghanima and distributing it for intelligent projects, both for education and infrastructure all across the countries where they have influence, mainly in Central Asia, okay? And they, of course, have the Ismaili Institute of Islamic Studies, I think it's called IIS, based in London.
Yes, the Institute of Ismaili Studies.
That's the one, yeah. So, you know, they're very efficient, let's put it that way. They are the closest ones to this system of taxation, in fact. So it's a very interesting example, all right? Whatever you may think of the Aga Khan, but he's certainly managing the money quite well, all right?
If actually they are trying to solve the problem with the so-called doctrine of wilayat al-faqih, that you have something like the government, which is consists from the learned people of the community, let's say, which is the basis for the contemporary government, which is ruling in Iran.
Yeah, this is valid for Iran, but it's not valid outside of Iran, okay? So for all the Shia that are in Iraq and Lebanon and, you know, Syria and Pakistan and India, this is not, you do not apply Walayat al-Fiqh, okay? So this is only for Iran, but obviously today's day and age, you know, Iran is the most kind of present and maybe the largest country, you know, with the Shiite population. Okay, but you know, if you follow Ali Sistani, for example, you're not obliged. He's against Walayat al-Fiqh, actually. Yeah, so you're not obliged as a Shia Muslim to follow this Khomeini doctrine. And in fact, my teacher Imam Razvi alayhi salam rejected the whole thing, the whole doctrine. He said to be politically active, we have to wait till after the appearance of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. In this, I mean, to run a state or two, let's say, yeah. So there's no consensus amongst the Shia on Walayat al-Fiqh. This is a specifically Iranian phenomenon, and even I know that many Iranian Shia are not in agreement.
And within the Sunnis, you know better that this question is very hotly debated. Who can, for example, can we, because today are the
Elections.
Yes, the elections in Turkey, that some would say that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is for Turkey, the representative of Rasulullah, or let's say in Morocco, the Moroccan king, he's the representative.
The Sultan,
Yes, the Sultan of Morocco. But the general conclusion we derived from all of this by looking to the continuity from the past to the present without interrupting this continuity, or istishab, if you want to say, or irtikat tarihi, if you can say, that for our times, the most, let's say, reasonable representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, regardless if you are Shia or let's say Ithna Ashir Shia, maybe, or Sunni, it would be a democratically elected government. And this government elects his prime minister, for example, or president, or whatever you can call him, who is taking the Muslim affairs in centralized manners. And we have a good country which manages its financial problems the best possible way. And that was on my side. Sheikh, if you want to add something, or the other, if you have some question, you're welcome to ask.
Yeah, I have nothing to add really. I think anyway, you know, right now in terms of an ideal policy for, you know, how the Quran says to collect zakat and to collect ghanima and how to distribute them properly and to whom we should distribute them, I think we're very far away in today's day and age, okay? So I think it's very hard to find a really good example. Even in Iran, you know, they're just, it's apart from the fact that they're just stealing the money of the people, yeah, but even the way their system is built has nothing really to do with what is coming out of the Quran and the ijma of the Ahlul Bayt, okay? So really there's, it's hard to find a good example about how zakat is being collected properly, how ghanimat is being collected properly. But again, we're in the Hawza, okay? And we're here to come up with theoretical solutions, how things could work, okay? If people did apply them properly, specifically if we Muslims did apply them properly. So the whole point of this theoretic exercise, and we don't want to spend all too much time on it because we still have the 14 other categories. But the whole point of this theoretic exercise is to say that we in Islam have enough tools already within the Quran, just the Quran, to create a fully functioning macroeconomy for a nation or a country, okay? And that is really the whole essence of this. If we use the tools properly, we don't need to go outside of Islam, okay? And we can say within Islam, and that should be the reflection that we take with us from this exercise, I think, more than anything. Okay, any questions, as Hassan was saying? If no questions, shall we jump
to put
then?
all we have presented to the moment in one sentence. So we have the question, in cases of crisis, can the government take a loan which potentially will indebt the future generations? And no, we are answering the question. Okay, firstly, given the discussion to the moment, we are supposing that we have Islamic government. What means Islamic government? Just any democratically elected government, and its prime minister or president will be the representative of Rasulullah. Okay, so far so good. But what financial funds we have to run the government? And the answer is, okay, we will use the ghanime, 20% of the ghanime to run the government. Then, okay, so but is it enough of 20% to run the whole country? And we say, yes, it should be enough. And also manage in the best possible way. We should not go to such situation that you will need a loan. But okay, then the next step. But something force majeure or unexpected happened. Global crisis or the coronavirus. Now, can you take the loan? And then our discussion and our ijtihad proceeds from this point further.
Yes, exactly. So the whole point is that anyway, you have some kind of Islamic style macroeconomy, okay? And within it, you had the sufficient funds to maybe create some kind of a emergency fund, okay? If something like COVID happens, or like the earthquakes that happened in Turkey recently, or some floods that happened in Pakistan last year, and these kind of things. And you took all the money from the emergency fund and you still needed more money because you had darurat, okay? So what happens in the next steps? Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Hassan Jan. May I just proceed then to the next categories?
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. But guys, please read this in detail if you want to understand the case study better, yeah? Because there's a lot of really interesting, for those of you who are interested in economy, there's really a lot of good information here. This kind of started as a question about COVID government lending, and it kind of ended up almost as an exercise in creating an Islamic macroeconomy, okay? So we took quite a lot of leverage and leeway in creating this fatwa so that future generations can maybe take it and research it further, and we can start taking steps in this direction, inshallah, okay? So I'm going to jump into the sunnah, and then I think Hassan and I will just go back and forth. So there were a couple of, really good articles that we found. This particular article, let me see if I can click on this. Let's see what happens if I click on this. Yes, it does open. So here you have a nice article called Public Finance in Islam by a gentleman called Mohammed Akram Khan. And yeah, he's Pakistani, he's from Islamabad. And he writes this very nice article, which if you're interested, I suggest you get an account on JSTOR. Anyway, I suggest you get an account on JSTOR. You can read, I think, 100 articles for free a month without paying anything. So it's quite a good deal. And you have here, as he says here, the study of public finance goes back to the early period of Islam. We find some 15 books dealing with public finance written by the early Muslim scholars, although presumably only a few of them are now available, okay? So, just to look at all this, these kind of studies, it's really interesting, this particular article, but also other articles similar. If you're interested in the subject matter, you get a much better feeling of the work that's been done historically in terms of macroeconomic and so-called fiscal policy, okay? So I just suggest that you go ahead and go into that. And now I'm looking for, where on earth did I have my, yeah, it's basically here. So you can see the screen, I guess, yeah? Okay. No one is protesting, so I'll just continue. So what's the interesting, kind of, there's not too much in terms of, if you want to limit the sunnah to hadith, because in this case we don't really have there's also the sunnah of behavior of the Muslims, or the sunnah of daily practice of the Muslims, or the sunnah of the ummah, if you will. But in this case, this is a very specific high-level subject, and so we look for a more text-based, detailed set of information, and it's hard indeed to find in the hadith anything really about this, but there are some hadith, like for example the hadith of Thawban radiallahu, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever dies and he's free of three things, kibr, khulul, and dead, specifically, he will enter paradise. So obviously, and it's listed in Tirmidhi among others. Abu Huraira has the same hadith or similar, but we don't really like to take Abu Huraira because of the fact that he was actually whipped for lying while he was the government of Bahrain.
Can go back the shared screen to the original document, because
you can't see it now, can you?
We are still in JSTOR.
Okay. Thank you so much. So let me reshare. This is the Word document. Here we go. Okay, how about now? Thank you so much. All right. So again, so to be free of debt, you'll if you're free of pride, hulul, and debt, you'll enter paradise. Okay, these are always this if you'll enter paradise. If you'll enter paradise. I never really have too much hope in that so much, except that if Allah wills, you'll enter paradise. Okay, that's finally at the end of the day. But let's say that the whole point of the hadith is, don't die, don't pass away being in debt to others as much as you can. Yeah. So there's a kind of a strong level of there's a very high bar before you go and you take money from someone. Okay, whether it's an individual basis, or if you apply the qiyas, then on a higher governmental or macroeconomic basis. Yeah, so there's a very high bar, because no one wants to have their way toward paradise blocked by the fact that they still have debt somewhere, or they created debt situation that could not be solved by future generations. Okay, so that's kind of what we got. There, if you follow up this document about public finance on JSTOR, you'll find a lot of macroeconomic fiscal policy, but not necessarily applying to these kind of current day, present day kind of, where all of the world is basically kind of caught in this web of international financing banks, and you can't really get out of it, right? So it's a very different financial system than the Prophet goes around and they wage some wars and they get some money and they collect the money of the Muslims and there are some donations, and with this they kind of fix all of the expenses of the state. Okay, so it's very different, completely different today than it is then. So the Sunnah, unfortunately, don't really help us too much according to our judgment. Okay, so I'll go on to the next stage. Hassan, go ahead. We're on Ijma.
So the next stage is also very short. It is a contemporary financial problem, and logically, or as you may expect, you cannot find almost any previous fatwa on the problem. Not to speak about ijma. That the short conclusion is that there is no ijma on this problem.
Exactly. Very good. Now, Nazar Ilmi was our next category. Now, as you see, we have a certain order of the criteria that we established after critically reflecting it in the class with Hassan John. And I'm sure you students did the same thing, going from Imam Razvi's criteria and then developing your own criteria. Okay, so please don't be surprised if sometimes the order now for the next criteria is maybe a bit different than what you're used to have seen before, or obviously different from what you developed yourselves. Okay, so here we place the current status of science very high, so directly after the ijma of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, alayhi wa sallam ajma'in.
So just to put That was the reason manifestations of law. So that we said that Quran and Sunnah and Ijma, they are manifestation of the divine law.
Yes.
And Nazar Ilmi, it was the manifestation of the natural law. And
Okay.
we put this two in one.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Very good. Okay, very good. So as you can see here, I mean, you can read all about it in different economic books, and in fact, the main point here is that, you know, the Nazar Ilmi is that the fuqaha, I mean, you know, we as the judges, if you will, or as the jurists, we should go outside of Islamic knowledge, specifically Islamic knowledge, and we should find the experts and the scientists, the economic scientists and the economic experts, and get their advice, their shura, in order to get a better picture of the current status of science. So we don't really know, if you will, if you want to look at it that way, let's pretend that we don't know anything about the economy, but we have to ask the experts, okay? And so one, you know, conclusion is that if you look at a lot of literature, they'll say, you know, government loans are typically kind of politically driven, and okay, they might solve certain problems, but then you also have short-term pressures, or, you know, you might utilize the resources improperly and you might waste the money. So a lot of money has indeed been wasted in poorly defined subsidies and funds and loans of different kinds, and is still being wasted today. However, intelligent government loans and subsidies can lead to long-term economic stability. So we don't take an extreme economically liberal position that all loans and subsidies are bad somehow, but there are good loans and there are good subsidies and there are good kind of private sector investments. Okay, so to make a long story short, ask the experts. Okay, Nazair, Hassan John.
Oh, this one.
Sorry, guys, are you still with us? I want to see your lovely faces. I'm happily
All of
married, but I
you,
still want to see your
please.
lovely faces. Okay,
Only David, he is riding his car at the moment.
that's fine. But the other guys, if you're there, let us know that
We
you're
have
there.
some problems with the connection when the camera is on.
Okay. Fair enough.
This is the reason. Don't think that I don't want to show myself, but just just sometimes the connection is a little bit bad.
That's okay.
It's not always, but
It's a discussion for another day. But this idea that we had last year of doing a Hawza together someday, all together, whether it's in Bulgaria, maybe Istanbul, maybe Germany, I still want us to hopefully all meet one day. But of course, now we're online, and so the best we can do now is try to be with each other as much as I can. But of course, if people are having connection problems, it's completely understood. Okay, so that's just that. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, Hassan.
We have one record. We have one house physically here, all of us in our village, and we have the record. Should Erwin when to put the record to see all of us together, and definitely when you're in Turkey, or maybe we can arrange it. We should gather physically to
I
make.
mean, inshallah. That's great. I'm so happy you made it all together for a Hawza. That's my favorite news. That's great news. Okay, go ahead, Hassan John.
Okay, here the case of Nazair. Just a moment. Oh, what we used Nazair for? Again, as we said, we do not have direct fatwa, which answers the question about government loans in the macroeconomic terms. But we have some fatwas here, which we can use. They are close to, they are connected with our questions. And with our brother Muhammad Farhan, who is not at the moment with us, but he propose that the Darul Ifta in Misr, the Egypt, let's say, Grand Mufti, has some very useful research. So we used Nawair here for the one specific point. When you have the loan in a contemporary world, you pay back the loan with interest. And the interest, or let's say, on other side, Quran prohibits riba, which is usury. Now the question is here: do we consider the interest rate also to be usury or the riba, which is forbidden in Quran, or it is not the riba which is forbidden or Quran? Or in Bulgarian terms, it is lihva or it is not lihva, the interest rate, let's say, of the central bank of Bulgaria or the European or the Federal Reserve in the States. Egyptians 5 consecutive of the Grand Muftis of the Egypt, they have given the fatwa, no, interest rates of the banks, they are not the riba, which is prohibited in the Quran. And it is for the reason was okay, to put it very short, that the riba prohibited in the Quran, it harms the site which takes the loan, because it should repay it several times more than what was taken initially. But in our societies, it is not the same, because the interest rates, it is considered some type of investigation. It is, let's say, 5% or 10%, for example, but it is not the half or the 100% of what you have taken. So it is investigation which is mutually beneficent. The person who took the money will use the money for to solve his problem, and he will repay the money very little above the rate we have, which he had taken the money. So it is beneficial for him. It is also beneficial for the bank for the profit which it take from the loan given. The same is the other way. You put money in the bank, for example, $1,000. After 1 year, you take 1,000 and let's say $50 or $1,070, for example. Again, it is mutually beneficial because bank uses your money to invest the different projects, and it is also beneficial for you because you have taken profit from your money. And the prohibited riba, it is the one where the difference, it is let double or triple the original amount of the money. So that is
to quickly also add to that, if I may. This is something that's very debated amongst the Muslims. Okay, now we have consulted with the Darul Ifta, if you will, the fatwa that they have put out, the imams that have, or the muftis that have put these out in Egypt, and we have decided to take this position. Okay, but this is not a fatwa about riba. Okay, but this is a fatwa about darurat in a macroeconomic crisis situation for government fiscal policy. However, it's still very relevant because as Muslims, we don't want to engage in riba, okay? So what is riba has to be discussed in a fatwa like this on some level, whether top, middle, or bottom. You have to discuss what is riba, because we're talking specifically about macroeconomic loans. And on another level, we have to discuss, since we're speaking in the English language and it's not clear for everyone what is riba, it's not even clear for the Arab-speaking native population because they also are having arguments about this, yeah? So it's not clear in today's world what is riba. It doesn't matter the language. but I can maybe highlight it to you very quickly by using the term usury. Okay, so usury is a very famous English word which refers to interest on a loan which is abusive. Okay, it's like an abusive interest rate. It's abusive because or it's very high, or it's multiplying, compounding, as Hassan was explaining, or there's some other abusive quality of the interest rate that's being applied. Someone is in a situation of darurat, they really need money, and someone has a lot of money, but they only give it, let's say, with an interest rate of 30% applicable within the first 12 months or something. Let's say a really short time period, okay? So of course, the person taking the loan cannot fulfill the condition, and if they break the condition, then maybe there's a security like a house or like a car or something that they have to give in return for not being able to repay the loan, and that pushes the individual who took the loan even further into a situation of poverty, and this kind of like spiral continue because then they have to take more debt and the situation just get worse. Yeah, so of course this is usury. Okay, so this is just to make a very basic linguistic analogy. What's prohibited in Islam is riba, and what riba is usury, but it's not necessarily interest rate, because today's interest rate consists of, firstly, the so-called time value of money. If I'm doing a business with you, I'm obviously doing it because I'd rather invest in you repaying me the money than if I put the same money in another industry. So that's the so-called time value of money. On top of this, you have operative costs of the banks or the financing institutions. So they have workers, they have directors, they have maybe rent that they have to pay, or maybe some kind of online platform. So these are operative costs that have to be covered, okay? So just these two components of the interest rate still have not made any money for the banks, okay? This is just covering cost, okay? And then you might have a small percentage of profit on top of that, okay? And then, of course, you have the basic fundamental interest rate as it's set by the central banks, okay? So you have the fundamental lending industry by the central bank, then you have the time value of money, and then you have the operational costs, and then at the top you have a small profit. And that's how in today's, if you look in today's markets, you might have, in the Eurozone at least, you might have interest rates of 4 to 5%, you know, depending on what industry you're in or what kind of credit, whether it's a company credit, corporate credit, or personal credit. So a 4 or 5% when you have the European Central Bank now putting out interest rates at 3.75% is obviously a very small additional profit, okay? Because you're talking about a jump from 3.75 to maybe 4.5, yeah? So it's a very small difference. So if you're in a darurat situation, you know, this is not riba at all, yeah? If you ask my humble opinion, studying it from an economic perspective, I happen to have a degree in economics, so I know about it. But again, you can have these debates forever, and the purpose today is not to finish this debate, but it's just to express our perspective of what we think riba is or what we think riba is not. So we took the position in this fatwa that riba is usury. In other words, it's abusive interest, like the US student loans, okay? If you look at the universities in the US, just to charge some kid who's 18 years old and he wants to study for 5 years, you know, they're charging student loans 100,000 or 120,000 over 4 years, maybe at 25%, okay? So 25% interest is obviously extremely abusive, yeah? So they're taking advantage of the kid's desire to get an education, all right? So that's riba. But this kind of situation, we feel in today's markets, at least here in the Eurozone, we don't really consider this riba, wallahu a'lam, okay? So that's just a little side discussion, how we got to this inside this fatwa.
But the connection, so, and we have also the second fatwa of Fazlur Rahman, who is a Pakistani scholar, who is researching the same topic about riba, ushering interest rate from the more historical perspective, and going directly to the linguistic of the Quranic ayat and the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and again came into the same conclusion that the interest rates they cannot be considered so easily to be the riba which is prohibited in Quran. Why it is connected to our ijtihad? Because when the government take the loan, it is expected it should be repaid with some interest rate. And here, giving the perspective that in our case we do not consider this interest rate to be the forbidden riba of the Quran. It is one plus or one cons that eases the decision that maybe this gives more freedom to the government to take the loan. Okay, Shay.
So it's my turn. Let's go on to Qanun Rasmi. We'll try to fly through maybe the next criteria to give you guys time to ask any questions. Theoretically, this call is finished at 4 o'clock, but let's see if we can continue on the same Zoom call. Otherwise, I'll send a new link. Okay, 4 o'clock European Standard. That means 5 o'clock in Sofia. So in about 11 minutes. Okay, so we'll try to go through as fast as we can, but maybe we need to have another call. We'll send you another link, inshallah. So Qanun Rasmi means applicable law. And of course, we take current financial systems into the equation and government fiscal policy. Each country has to take into consideration their own fiscal and monetary policy. And not all countries are resorting to loan and debt in view of the pandemic. So Mohammed Farhan John, who was present for most of last year, he brought this great case study of Singapore. And basically, Singapore had very deep national reserve because they have good economic policy, because they avoid these long-term debt financing situations, and they act efficiently in their macroeconomic policy. So therefore, they were able to recover quickly and efficiently from the economic impact caused by the COVID pandemic. And we list you a few articles here of the last couple of years, February 22, and also this year, about the budget, the Singaporean national budget, and how they were able to draft purely from their national reserve rather than be forced to take some crazy loans from some different banks at very high interest. So really, mashallah, very good Singapore. Yeah, if everyone were to run their government like Singapore in terms of macroeconomic policy, it would be a very different world. Okay, so Singapore is a beautiful example of a country with majority Muslims, I believe majority Muslims, that actually run their economy well. Yeah, so we should take Singapore maybe as an inspiration. Yeah, go ahead, Hassan John.
So the next one, it is also very short. That as we said, where it comes to money, it is
there is no adab.
difficult to apply adab.
Actually, but money matters in general are where adab is most important, or very, very important. Let's say after maybe adab toward Allah and adab toward your family members and so on. After these personal adab, the adab toward business relationship is very important. But yes, in this case, it's not really applicable. Okay. So jumping into levels of historical context, irtaqa tarihi. Actually, we have a couple of great examples here. Hassan brought these. The Marshall Plan after World War II is a positive example for managing the crisis. And you also have the contemporary Chinese case in many third world countries, which is they directly go in and they take the capital, 100% equity, and they build the infrastructure and they create the local value. Okay. So this is a big difference from the kind of typical US-driven IMF World Bank policies where everything is done on loan basis, and then the local politicians in Africa or Asia or South America can do anything they want with the money, basically, and usually they waste the money, and a lot of times there's corruption, and they take the money and they put it on their own Swiss bank account somehow, and then 4 years later they move to Europe. Yeah. So to avoid all this corruption, you know, what the Chinese are doing is just going into the country, taking the money, taking their best engineers, and actually creating the infrastructure and doing the projects, yeah, and avoiding all this banking back and forth and all this kind of, because at the end of the day, the banks are like brokers, you know, they're basically brokering the money, okay? But do you need the broker? Not necessarily. If you have the capital, you can just go in and do it, yeah? So obviously the IMF and the World Bank are not thrilled by this. The US is not thrilled by this. But right now, the US have a terrible economic debt situation themselves, and they're not able to really react to the Chinese. And that's why the Chinese are becoming stronger and stronger on the political global scale, because they have a very abundant national reserve. And a lot of countries owe them money, as opposed to them owing some country or some banks. Yeah, so they have a very solid, fundamentally sound macroeconomic policy, which the US simply do not. Okay.
Yeah, but
Go ahead.
wasn't it there the biggest contractor that was government funded just bankrupt? The Evergrande consortiums. Basically, it's the same there, but because everything is produced in China, it's they have a little bit wiggle room, you know.
Well, the thing is that yes, there are companies and contractors that go bankrupt in China. This is not to say that there are none. Yeah, they're not perfect either. Things happen. There's a lot
but it's government funded, so it's kind of, there was basically million people who lost their money because they were paying for houses that the government was going to build through that company, and then the company bankrupted, and then these people are like, okay, now what? So
well, the Chinese government. Let's remember that and I'm not in any way a defender of the Chinese government, because I think they have a terrible, actually disastrous human rights record, similar to the Nazis of Nazi Germany in many ways, unfortunately. But so I'm certainly not defending the Chinese approach to government. But what I will say is that okay, there are failures, and this is now a growing economy, and they're going from being a very poor nation to being a rich nation very quickly. And so sometimes some things are bound to happen, some mistakes are bound to happen. But I think that in the long term, their policy is more healthy, because nonetheless, the Chinese have a very strong, abundant national reserve, and they have a positive current account balance, which neither the US, nor most European countries have. Germany actually does have a positive current account balance, which is nice, because they export more than they import. So they have a strong independence in terms of their importing policy. But to make a long story short, I just wanted to say that there are some positive examples today, like especially Singapore, and also in general the Chinese approach to macroeconomics. But again, of course, you're completely right. There are always, bad examples.
The interesting about the Singapore is that was like the ghetto of Malaysia, and then because they were so bad, it was such a ghetto that Malaysia basically kicked them out, and now 50 years later, Singapore is like this economic champion of the Southeast Asia, which is just a miracle what can be done when there is no corruption.
Absolutely.
There's a very little bit corruption in the government and the economic sector,
Absolutely. And I think, Singapore realized the mistakes that they had made, and they learned a lot. And, if you talk to, I actually have the pleasure of knowing one or two guys that are involved in Singapore economy. And if you talk with these guys, they really are proud of their country, proud of their government, proud of being Muslims in one of the few Muslim countries that is not subject to lots of corruption and nepotism and all these kind of money stealing, money grabbing opportunities, that is completely financially independent and with very little resource apart from what's upstairs in the brain. Not a big oil country, not a big gas country, a small country in terms of size and population, but look at their economic power in Southeast Asia. So they've really, as you said, they really became this in just 50 years, just 2 generations, they became this really powerful economic example for other countries, whether Muslim or not, doesn't matter. Just a great example for macroeconomic policy. Okay, so that's the positive side. And let's say what else can happen? Bad interventions, like the Great Depression is a good example of it's really a bad example of how to run governments, and how bad tariff policies can lead to unemployment and high inflation and really the chaos that happened as a result of the Great Depression, which many say would never have ended without the onslaught of World War II. So if World War II hadn't come, and if the US hadn't gotten extremely engaged in building you know, the largest weaponry machine on the planet, basically, at that time, then they may never have come out of the Great Depression, or at least not the way that the US did, which was after the Second World War, one of the most powerful countries in the world. Okay, so we have recent sources on these. I don't want to go too much into it now. We have about less than 2 minutes left, less than 1 minute left now. Let's see, hopefully the call will hold. But just very quickly on Irtaqa Tarihi. So one Islamic example is the Ottoman Empire, which was known as the broke lady of Europe, or somehow the poor lady of Europe, back at the end of the Ottoman Empire, and hugely in debt to the British, French, and Russian empires, who would later go on to form the Triple Entente against the Ottomans, triggering World War I, and of course the dissection and the segmentation of the Ottoman Empire, which ended in handing over Palestine, obviously, to the British, and later to the Children of Israel, and the loss of North Africa, and you know, and all of the spiraling turmoil of the Middle East that has come from this kind of falling apart of the Ottoman Empire. So if the Ottoman Empire had been financially more stable, there's a chance that, you know, all of these events would have taken a different shape. Probably today we still wouldn't have the Ottoman Empire, but at least, you know, the Middle East might be in a more healthy, you know, a dynamic than certainly what it is today. Wallahu a'lam. So it looks like this call is continuing, although it's 2 o'clock. So let's just keep going. Go ahead, Hassan John. I don't want to just give you the whole time the non-applicable. So why don't you take the next
then
4? No,
with one sentence comment.
no, take the next four. Take the next 4. Take the next 4. It's not fair to you.
But with Irtika Tarihi, we can argue both with the good and the bad examples,
Yes,
that it would be prohibited or it would be allowed for the government to take the loan.
That's it. Go ahead and take the next four examples, Hassan.
Okay. Let's say the Qiyas.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we just quickly, Urf and Riwaj are not applicable, okay? Because this is not about local customs. This is not about good behavior, as we said with adab. This is not about, you know, country traditions or this. So let's leave all that out and let's, you know, jump into Qiyas. Go ahead, please.
So, again, this was proposed a good idea by brother Muhammad Farhan, that the story of Surah Yusuf, of let's say the dream of the Egyptian king, that Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted them, and then it is can be or cannot be taken as example for building funds which will be used in the case of emergencies. But I remember, Sheikh, you say here the difference in our situation is that we have the crisis, and now the question is what we should do with the crisis. But in the case of Hazrat Yusuf and the king of the Egypt, they knew about the crisis, let's say 15 years, let's say 7 years before the crisis came. But in any case, it is example, as also in the case of Singapore, that it is good that you have funds which are intended.
Hello. Hello.
I think the connection broke.
Okay. But you're online, Vali, yes? You're online?
Yes, I am.
Me too. Isain, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. I guess David and Rocco are also with us, I'm guessing. Anyway, they're in the call. Let's see. Hassan, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
So what was the last thing you heard from me?
So you were mentioning that that basically the story of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam is somewhat applicable in this case, but not 100% applicable, because he knew that there were going to be 7
Yes,
great
in
years and
advance.
7 hard years and so on. Okay, but this is a prophet of Allah. I mean, so not every macroeconomic decision maker has that kind of insight. So obviously, you still have to have some tools to work with.
Yes, the difference that they knew about the crisis in advance.
Yes.
Let's say 7 or 8 years in advance. But
Yes.
our case is different. What to do when the crisis happened.
However, the main lesson is nonetheless the same, which is that those in charge of macroeconomic policy should create emergency funds for these kind of situations, because maybe the economy will go for a long time very good, but still you should keep a part of that in savings just in case an emergency happens. And of course, it's the same in our daily lives when we're managing our money. Also, we should take a lesson from this and make sure to save some money in case of any emergency that comes, inshallah.
Yes, exactly. If you're capable, build the emergency funds, which will help you when the crisis comes. And the next one, the Quranic verses. That in some sense, the story of Hazrat Yusuf can be used for qiyas. The second story for qiyas are the Quranic verses, which are mentioning for individual forgiving of loans, and also which are encouraging giving loans to those people who need the loans. So it is directly the case which we are considering. So if you are capable, give the loan to the one who needs the loan. And the next one, if he is not capable to return back the loans by legitimate reasons, then forgive him the loan. Okay, but what we are using this ayat here in the point 11 of Qiyas, and we are not using them exactly in the first one, directly in the Quran, and solve all the problems directly, but by the ayahs, because they are speaking in an individual manner, not what the government as a whole should do. That is the first difference. They are let's say advice to the single Muslim what should be his behavior. And the second difference, that it is not order, it is not obligation, but it is recommendation. That is the second difference. So, but if we extended the case from the case from the case of the individual to the society as a whole, yes, if let's say the country is very rich, who gives the loan, and the country which takes the loan is very poor, and so on and so on, and it won't be harmful for the whole country again. Yes, the loan could be forgiven. It is recommended, but again, it is not on the level of obligation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hassan. So istihsan is a fun criteria, okay, guys? So remember, istihsan comes from the word ihsan or hasanat or husna and so on, and it means somehow beauty or wonderfully, or greatness, or the most high level of really beauty, if you will, in the ethical sense, or in the moral or spiritual sense. Obviously not in the visual sense, yeah. But it can cut both ways. This interesting application of what we're calling kind of ethical beauty. You can say that yes, you should allow the government spending in these kind of situations to cover the short-term darurat, or you should say no, we need to protect the future generations. And we have to make the sacrifice, today. So there are two ways to definitely look at istihsan. I know that you talked about istihsan in detail, so we'll get into it. But istihsan shows its beauty through rahmat usually. So rahmat is the main kind of expression of istihsan in most cases. And that would allow governments to spend in crisis times, providing, of course, that ad-darurat had been sufficiently established. Okay, so let's go quickly to istislah or the maslahat. Go ahead, Hassan.
So here the essence of the whole thing. So istislah, where is the benefit from the common people for the whole country? Again, you can say if you look for the generation, for the living generation, that istislah, the common wealth or the common benefit is to take the loan because it will ease your situation. But if you look from the perspective for the future generation, which will be indebted and should repay the loan, then again you can go to the opposite side and to say that istislah is not to take the loan. But because the Sheikh will explain the next point, istidlal, we reach the consensus that the situation, the crisis of the, let's say, the COVID, it is the rural situation. It is an extreme kind of situation, which is not the normal situation. It is giving us, it allows us to take this loan. That is, istislah is to take the loan, because in the other case, you will put these people in extremely hard situation, which they would be unable to live, basically.
Yeah. So the core thing of this entire case study, okay, now is coming, which is the istidlal, which is that we have to establish the darurat, okay, in order to justify how we can get into these huge macroeconomic lending policies. We have to be able to justify the darurat. And so we took the term dalil, or which is of course like proof or evidence, and it turns into istidlal, and we took it to mean, either you have to decide for the darurat of today or for the darurat of tomorrow. But definitely this COVID crisis has really created an economic catastrophe for many countries all over the world. And so we did indeed decide that, based on istidlal, that a darurat has occurred, and therefore, the dalail have been satisfied, or the dalil have been provided. And but nevertheless, we should learn our lessons from the pandemic, and in the future, we should be able to create a more stable macroeconomy by everything that we talked about in order to proceed. But again, this definition of darurat is the fundamental dalil that we have to have in our fatwa in order to justify this kind of huge, supersized macroeconomic lending programs. Okay? Go ahead, Hassan, with istisab.
And again, with this hub, we can say that we didn't have, let's say, such a previous macroeconomic example, so that it is possible to have a continuity in it's not very applicable on this case. But we can take this hub for the other problem, which is related to our ijtihad, and it is the central collection of the funds, and who is the representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But historically, there is a continuity in the collecting of, let's say, these funds from the zakat, for the ghanime, most important ghanime, because the other ones, they are very minimal incomes from them, but ghanime, it is collected in central manner by the Khalif or by the Imam and so on, and that in our days the continuity would be that the central Islamic government, which we suppose it is the democratically elected, it is the central organ which is in position to apply this continuity in the central collection of these funds.
Exactly, and distribute them properly. Thank you so much, Hassan John. Now, I need to ask you guys, I know I don't see your faces, your lovely faces, because I know you have some connection issues, but do you have any questions so far? Any questions about, because this has been a lot of material. I mean, we've definitely come at you with a very deep case study, and I understand that this is a lot of material, but do you have any questions so far before we go to the result? Would you like to take a 5-minute break before we go to the result? Are your brains completely fried? Shall we take 5 minutes to get a coffee?
If the government can collect the zakat, and the zakat is given to the people who are poor, who are in need of medical procedures due to this pandemic, why it's not possible for the government to use zakat for that? Because as a poor person, you can definitely use zakat, and if you're just, doing that administrative.
So the term zakat. Now remember that in the Quran, okay, the sadaqah is very specifically defined, okay, but the zakat is in fact not so specifically defined. But there has always been an ijma, and it doesn't matter if Sunni or Shia. There's always been an ijma that basically the categories that are applied to sadaqah also apply to zakat, okay? But you could open that discussion, and you could apply it to different categories. But even though nonetheless, zakat is for, the different categories of people, and none of that, what it says, limits how that money is used. Or in other words, there's no limitation on, like, if someone who's poor or needy, as the terms are, if they apply it for a medical procedure, the money that they receive, or if they apply it for food or shelter or water or whatever it is, that's not so specifically defined.
Okay.
But that's not really I wouldn't say that that's the core of the issue, because normally zakat, even if it is applicable, but let's not remember that in most countries in the world right now, zakat is not being properly collected, okay? And very, very few governments or organizations are properly collecting zakat. But of course it could be applied, but the case study here is, you've applied zakat and you've applied ghanima and you've applied, the awqaf have done whatever they could do, and yet you're still in this, very huge kind of macroeconomic crisis. So what do you do?
Okay.
Is that understood?
Yep.
Okay, great. Any further questions at this point?
Let's see the final result, and then I prefer to continue.
And then you can disagree. Okay, that's very good.
Yeah, and then I can disagree.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to explain what a result should be, and then Hassan John is going to have the pleasure of presenting the result. I don't know if Hassan wants to say something, but we can't hear you.
I want to add just one sentence to
Sure.
what Veli have asked. So here, let's say, can you repeat once more your question, Veli, about the healthcare? Veli?
Why can't we make the government, some sector in the government that can collect and redistribute this money that are coming from zakat?
But for what purpose?
For the same purpose, to relieve the people from the COVID.
But here question is directly using the money for the medicine or giving back the money to them, so they are going to buy, let's say, the medicine or going to the hospital. Which of the two situations?
People who are waiting, let's say that it's kind of the American health system where you have to pay to be treated. So
Okay, let's leave this for another discussion because
Okay.
it would have many details. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, guys, there's no reason why zakat could not be applied to the medical, emergency situations of the people that are, recipients of zakat. But the question is here more like, the government spending programs that were done for small businesses or industry or
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
keep up the macro economy of countries. Yeah, because many of the countries suffered greatly economically because of COVID, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do with medical emergency or anything like that, right?
So because
Okay.
just in one
Yeah.
sentence here,
I understand now.
the disagreement was that with ijma, you are not allowed to use the money, even it is for the poor people. You are not entitled to use this money even for them the way you think it is the best possible way to them. You should give directly money back to them and live from there.
Yeah.
But that is with ijma, it is not with Quran. And the discussion was that within the Quran, nowhere in the Quran there is answer where you should spend the zakat. The ayat with the 8 categories, it is talking about sadaqah, not zakat.
Exactly.
And then the ijma is that this sadaqah, it is the same with the zakat, but this is not in the Quran. This is with ijma. So answering your question, you as a mujtahid, if you think you have very serious reason to break the ijma, to go directly to Quran and to make reinterpretation, then yes, you can decide to spend this money in a completely different manner.
Well, you can decide to challenge the ijma in the first step, right? And then where does it go from there? So you've challenged the ijma and you get to your, kind of theoretical result, and you still have the rest of the fatwa to continue, right? But definitely this is what Imam Razvi alayhi salam has taught. So what Hassan Jan has said is completely correct. And this is one of the main things that we try to express to you in this year 2 class of Usul al-Fiqh, is that even an ijma which has held for many generations can be challenged, okay? It's your personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first point. And the second point is you should be able to go into the reasoning. In other words, with aql or with divine reason, you should be able to go into Quran and Sunnah and the other categories and challenge the ijma in this manner, okay? So I actually got my first ijtihad blessing from Imam Razvi alayhi salam when I challenged an ijma, okay? And that's when he gave me, blessings to teach ijtihad, because he said, okay, you understood the process, by challenging ijma, you understood the process, okay? So this is how I got the blessings from, Imam Razvi alayhi salam. And but nevertheless, I think for your question, Veli, it's not necessarily a question of challenging ijma in that sense. It's more a question of, what can the people do with the money that receive the money once they get it? Yeah. So, but of course, Hassan is also right, because the direct application of the funds paid by zakat has not been clarified specifically in the Quran. So that is also a very important window of opportunity for future talented jurists like yourself, inshallah, to solve in the future, if you so decide. Okay, and now, if no further questions, I would jump into the results. But what I want to do first is just tell you what a result should look like. So you remember we talked about what should a question look like, and now let's talk about what an answer should look like, or what should a result look like, okay? So a result should be a clear and decisive fatwa or ijtihad deriving from the case study or from the question, viewed through the core principles of Usul al-Fiqh, as we talked, and based on the applied methodology. And you've seen, now we've gone very, very, very deep in this case and applied all of the methodology. And all of this work should lead to a final result that is applicable to the stated context and is also limited by that particular context, and sufficiently and accurately give guidance on the case study. Okay, so that's what a result should look like. Okay, it should be clear, it should be decisive, it should come from the question, it should be viewed from the core principles of the Usul al-Fiqh, and it should be based on the applied methodology. All right, go ahead, Hassan, it's all yours.
So you are leaving the hardest part to me, Sheikh.
You're the student, so it's up to you to master it. Well, you're the student and the teacher at the same time. This is the fun part. This is the fun part. You get the glory and the fame and the paparazzis taking all the pictures. So go for it.
I would I would go the easiest way I can do it. Just read the result. So, okay. The first thing, the COVID-19 pandemic presented a worldwide medical emergency, the likes of which our generation had it hard to perhaps never experience it. So it is a precedent, the first point. This in turn led to a similarly catastrophic global economic crisis, including a recession in many nations, in different level on different countries, let's say. Therefore, we consider such an emergency situation to meet the criteria of so-called darurat, emergency necessity as defined as Islam, and having cleared the barrier for many, if not most, of the governmental macroeconomic lending programs to have been halal. Because here, when you have established the Darura, the ruling is that the Darura is capable to make many of the things which are initially haram, to make them halal. So, of course, each nation, this gives the government the freedom, much more freedom in each decision. Let's say it is a conscious, impartial, and just government. If we, in the bottom, we will have the qualification. If it considers that it indeed have the need to make this loan, to make the loan. Of course, each nation's fiscal policy is individual, and therefore we cannot generalize for each country with this fatwa. The reader may desire to check our conclusions and compare them to his her macroeconomic and fiscal situation. Again, that don't copy paste. Look very well and deep in the situation and apply this fatwa and this ijtihad accordingly. Also, it must be said that in today's world, even in majority Muslim countries, neither zakat nor ghanima or khums are being collected properly, except in very few cases. Therefore, our Quranic findings are limited by their current applicability. However, they still remain a fantastic ideal for which to strive for future Islamic macroeconomic policy as may be applicable. For example, in majority Muslim countries, which again in simple words says that also do have in mind that in some sense we are also presupposing some hypothetical situation of Islamic country and Islamic government, which we are applying our study case to it, and so compare very well with the reality, or also that it is ideal for which that the current Muslim countries and government should strive to come to the ideal, let's say. Okay, Sheikh, you can
Very
proceed
good.
with
You did a
the
wonderful job, Hassan. I'm very proud of you. Very good. So, do we have any huge disagreements from Isain or from anyone? And do we have any comments or questions at this point before?
So before the questions, one further addition. So we'd say that the fatwa should be clear and as much as possible And even then, you are seeing that here the answer it is not just yes or no,
Yeah.
but how the best way it tries to be clear, how many here, let's say a condition we have put, and that you should not copy paste, and that you should look in the context and so on. All of this the mujtahid, he is doing the fatwa, should have in mind, and also the person who is taking the ijtihad and applying the ijtihad also should be very careful with the applying the ijtihad.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Very good. Very good. So, of course, clear and decisive does not mean black and white, yes and no, you know, halal, haram. It doesn't mean that necessarily. It just means clear and decisive, okay? And in our case, we said that we've established the darurat, that's the clarity and the decisiveness. We established the darurat, okay? In step 14, istidlal, okay? We took the dalil of what was happening to governments and countries all over the world, and we said, this is definitely a darurat. And we cleared that barrier, and so therefore, many, if not most of the governmental economic lending programs became, in that sense, halal. But we had to limit it because there are limitations, and there are going to be some more qualifications below that are very important to go through, and we will go through those now. But before we jump into those qualifications, which are essentially limitations, let's ask if anybody has a big disagreement with where we are, or any comments or questions.
I will go into my role now.
Okay, good. Let's hear.
You say you use previous example after Second World War, and there they just not use. Yeah, they use the loans, but the funny thing, the interesting, they use so much coupons for the moment of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the main reason that Germany and other nations go through post-war trauma and stress, and everything was destroyed and they get up so quickly. And maybe if you see what they're doing there, and we make it like in this case, because the quasi money, coupons, they are like a money, but not exactly like money, because you cannot spare it, for example, alcohol or to buy new shoes. New shoes, yes, but you cannot buy the latest iPhone, etc. And if we think that we need to help the people in this bad situation, maybe we can apply to use this thing that the previous generation are using it. And this is why Germany came so quick after First World War, and after that, after Second, is the same story, because when you have this one, you can boost your economy, because you give something like money to people. They have their necessity, but you don't spend too much for some stupid stuff. In the case you must take a loan to buy medicine, etc., I am agreed, but just to give, like it was this time in the pandemic, I am a little bit skeptical about it. Let's see what is happening in the past, and how the people in this time manage it. Now we make exactly the opposite. We just give money to everyone.
Look, I agree with you. I agree that there have to be limits, and what will happen below, you'll see how we qualified our judgment below.
Can I just also very shortly? I think we discussed this, but it was the example about the China and its politics versus IMF and its politics. But with IMF, you are giving the money to the government, for example, the Bulgarian government, and it wastes all the money, as you are saying, no any benefit. But with the example with China, they are not giving you the money. They are coming in your country. They are building the infrastructure. They are building the different things, and then you have the result. So that was in some way it is presented in the ijtihad. That look at the specific country and government. If they are civilized and just and so on, okay, no problem. Give them the money directly. But if they are a third world country, for example, I would say as our country, Bulgaria, then that's not the best politic to do, to proceed with them. Go directly on ground as you're saying, root gross level, and just do the work.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
with,
go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
if I can, in cultures like Bulgaria, no matter what you do, there will be corruption, and there will be a lot of corruption. So no matter if you do it with coupons, they will make something that it's some kind of scheme that they are going to collect the money. At least when you give people the money, that is a little bit, you know, on a mental level, you feel a little bit better. The country is going to, you know, do you understand what I'm saying? That if when the government wants to steal, they will steal. It's not going to change that.
Yeah, but you can have. It's funny because you can also manage the stealing of the money. Yeah, so like that's why I think it's good that we talked about the Chinese example, because the Chinese do it intelligently. They still come with a suitcase full of money. Yeah. But they do it differently. They go and they build the damn project, okay? Because they know that if they just give the money in the form of a loan, nothing is going to happen. Nothing will get done, okay? But the Chinese say, we're going to build the road, and we're going to build the power plant, and we're going to build the schools, and we're going to build the hospitals. And of course, we know that, you know, to satisfy the politicians and make sure we get all the paperwork and everything, we have to bring some suitcases with some money. Okay, that's just the way, unfortunately, 3/4 of the world works, yeah? As a European, I despise it, but it is what it is, yeah? So I can't change it. It is what it is. So that's what they do, yeah? Now, of course, this is supposed to be an Islamic fatwa, or some kind of this is supposed to have some kind of ethical and moral content. So, of course, there should be no corruption. There should be no nepotism. There should be no black suitcases filled with money. And so I agree with you in that sense that, you know, and I'm happy to qualify again the result in that direction, that if you can go and you can take the equity and you can do things with the equity, it's better than providing a loan. So I think if that's Isane's kind of main objection, I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think we can decide to make an adjustment in that direction. Okay. But for now, the only question we had was, and it can be a lessons learned from this exercise, that, you know, governments, you know, if they can apply the equity, it's better than if they give the loan. Okay, that can be a main kind of takeaway, and maybe we could have highlighted that more in this fatwa, yeah, in the results specifically. But certainly what we did is we established the darurats, and we said, you know, they need to get the money, and many of these countries don't have a positive account balance and a positive national reserve like China, so they wouldn't be able to do equity even if they wanted to, because they're actually in debt already before the pandemic. So then the pandemic comes and they're even more in a financial problem, so they have to take a loan, yeah? So that's how I see it. I think if you can go in with equity and you can build real projects and do real engineering, that's always the best result, yeah? I don't have any problem with that. Anything else?
Yeah, but then there's this problem where I forgot which country it was, where the Chinese basically built some infrastructure that nobody's going to use it. So there is some also downsides of that, you know. I think it was some airport with some major highway or something like that.
Yeah.
That basically people don't have cars. You're
So
building
that's
a highway.
always problem with investment. For example, you have 10 investment projects. half of them are successful, the other 5 are not successful. That is just the nature of making investment in the future.
Yeah, you can't control that, and you certainly cannot judge that from here, you know. But I do appreciate the example that, and again, as I said before, I'm upset with the Chinese government for many things, but this is just a positive example of how using equity capital, if you have it, rather than constantly depending on the bank, is a positive step forward, I think, in fiscal economic policy. Okay, so maybe we jump forward and we look into the qualifications. So again, qualification 1, and what qualification means is like limitation or consideration. Okay, so we give you the fatwa, and then we think about, you know, how it should be qualified. So debt versus reserve. Should governments not have built up reserve in advance? Yes, they should have, but sometimes you have an emergency that exceeds even your emergency budget. So even if you're a capital positive government, even if you have an emergency reserve, maybe something like COVID-19 would blow up your emergency reserve, and you still have to have this dawrurat that you have to get some money from somewhere. Yeah. Qualification 2. Is such a situation really a darurat? We say yes. However, a future policy, in the most cases, but future policymakers should have learned their lessons from COVID. So in other words, this should not happen again in 5 years. The next pandemic comes, yeah? The chicken scandal or the frog virus or something like this, yeah? And then the whole thing again, it should not happen. Yeah, we should have learned our lessons in terms of macroeconomic policy. We should have built larger emergency funds. We should have gotten our account balances and our currencies in order. We should have limited inflation, and then we should be in a much better position to respond, inshallah. Okay, so we should learn something from COVID-19 and all the economic crisis that happened, as opposed to always making the same mistakes every 5 years or 10 years. Yeah. Hassan, would you like to take the next one?
Okay, number 3. Okay, this is the point of shura. So we all very broadly discussed shura also in our beta class. In every case, every fatwa, make shura as much as possible. It will never harm. But here, when it is economics, for example, or it is biochemistry, or engineering, or other discipline, which are not within the field of Islamic study, it is not recommended, but it is obligatory to you to make the shura with the experts, because if you do not do it, basically you have done nothing. If you do not have an understanding of the field of the problem you are researching, you're just doing nothing. So here the example given us, because in our cases it is would be recommended for the government. So here the fields which are related to our ijtihad, the healthcare, the medicines, to have also economic experts and so on to make a good ijtihad.
Excellent.
Okay.
And of course, I'll take the 4th and you can take the 5th if you like, Hassan. So the checklist for professional government fiscal planning, reducing darurat in the future. So again, we want to limit darurat in the future by learning our lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, inshallah. Okay. And what are we going to do? Balance your budgets. Okay. Get your currency stabilized and the inflation in check. Get a healthy macroeconomic account balance. In other words, trades balance. Create an adequate and realistic emergency fund allocation. Have a sufficient health infrastructure and health insurance system for the people. Investments in health and science research to get ahead of future pandemics so that these things can be identified more quickly, inshallah. and any other further professional required emergency measures, which we leave to the experts through Shura. And again, here we are in our theoretical class, and we're kind of telling the leaders of the world how to run their governments economically. Okay, but they're not doing it properly. That's the fact, yeah? So it may sound very simple to do all these things. Okay, go ahead and balance your budget, okay? But I don't want to have that job, okay? Because it's a very hard and difficult job, yeah? But nonetheless, we must always keep these macroeconomic issues in front of us, so that we're not surprised the next time that a pandemic comes. Somehow humanity has to learn from this, and we have to be able to take a giant human step, if you will, after this experience. We cannot keep going backwards and falling backwards into old habits, but we have to take a giant step for humanity and hopefully have learned something from this, inshallah. Go ahead, Hassan, on number 5.
So, the number 5, in simple words, think about the future generation when you are taking the loan, because you are easing your situation. Think well also as put in simple words, and about all the qualification. So the purpose of limitation, let's say, because government can, for a hypothetical situation, can take the ijtihad or the fatwa and say, okay, here the answer is yes, in the emergency situation, you can take the loan, and they are taking the big loan and they are wasting all the money, or they are not wasting it, but they are just putting them in their pocket. So that is the purpose of the qualification. So let's see about the government and its politics, and with this qualification we will see if if the government is just, and if had good financial politics, and it can be trusted, if it is in the, let's say, framework of qualification, then it is in some sense have the it can be trusted to take the loan. But if we look at the government, looking at the qualification, and it doesn't answer, doesn't fulfill any of this qualification, then most probably it is corrupted government which will not do any beneficial with the money taken.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hassan John. So we close our result. We said that these loan policies in darurat, as long as we're not talking about riba, and remember that riba is extreme usury. So as long as we're not talking about extreme usury, okay, but we are just talking about some basic loans to solve these very specific darurat situations, we say that in most cases that these are halal. And of course, that each nation's fiscal policy is individual, and we cannot generalize for each country. Therefore, the reader, probably you can imagine some a minister of economy, or his team maybe working on creating and drafting these loan programs in parliament or in congresses, etc. They might want to check such conclusions, particularly in majority Muslim countries. They may want to consider our conclusions and hopefully learn from them, inshaAllah. Wallahu a'lam. And thus we lead to the qualifications, and the recommendation is to really learn and study these qualifications and apply them well in advance of any similar pandemic or emergency economic situation in order to avoid such a global economic catastrophe in the future, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam. And thank you very much for listening. It's been a very, very long day today, almost 3-hour Hawza. So congratulations for making it this far. And a final chance to ask any questions. I would just quickly say, the core structure of this fatwa or ijtihad, if you will, can be the same one for your study. So in other words, you can start with the case study at the very top. Here you go. Starting here with the case study, which is basically the question. Again, exploring the methodology. This methodology will always stay the same, okay? So this is the methodology of Zaidi Buhari Fir as taught by Sayyid Mehdi Imam Razvi alayhi salam. That's not really going to change. But, even, looking at these core principles, or especially when you start to apply the order and the criteria, it will of course change from class to class and from year to year and from subject to subject, okay? From case study to case study. So that will change. But then, of course, the result, being clear and decisive, etc., will be the same. And then you always have a result with qualifications. And at the end, as Imam Razvi used to say, the most important is to say, Wallahu a'lam, Allah is wisest. Okay? So thank you very much, everyone. Are there any further questions? Are people still alive? I still don't see your pictures. Maybe you all got COVID in the meantime. I hope not.
For final
I
time,
have
let's see your beautiful faces for one last time, Veli and Rocco.
Okay,
I
guys.
have a
What's your
question
question? Veli?
about.
Go ahead.
So, Veli,
It's a
just
little
excuse
bit
me,
a side question.
Veli, before you
Yeah.
opportunity. So, would you agree to make again Hawza, all of us, the next Saturday on Sunday with you, Sheikh, because we are already ready with our list, and that was one of the conditions to present and defend our list before you. So we are ready to do that. If you
Yeah, I mean, my
example,
agreement is pending that I receive the final thesis from year one from all of the students who haven't submitted it yet before that. Okay, so if there are any students still in the group that didn't submit their year one final thesis yet, please submit it on Friday, and then we can have the Hawza on Sunday.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay, we will manage then the future date of our.
Yeah, I'm not saying this to Veli and to Rocco, by the way. I'm not saying this to Veli and to Rocco because you guys are still on track for this year. Apologies if any misunderstanding. So this is only for the students from last year that wanted to. Yeah, I didn't want to mention you specifically. I didn't want to mention anyone specifically, but those students from last year that didn't submit yet, please submit because the other one wants to proceed. But Veli and Rocco, you are outside of this, so you are obviously your final thesis can come during the summertime, inshallah. Okay.
Okay,
So
this one thing. The next thing was because right after that you wanted to make one more common Hawza in which to about our choice of a particular ijtihad, and then to proceed with the ijtihad. So should we make it into separate Hawza, or we can combine it in one Hawza to present and defend our list, and then to present our choice, and then to start the practical work? What are you saying?
Look, that's completely up to you how you want to do it. I'm not close to either way, so you can decide in
So
yourselves.
we are also okay either way. What do you think would be the better?
Okay, I mean, I think it's fine if you want to take one more week, and really, yourselves get your question right? Because maybe you need to take some time to get your question first, right? Do you already have a question? Have you thought about a question?
We have one or two I suppose one more Hawza to clear what would be the question. But I'm asking about the representing it to you. Should be the list criteria in one Hawza and the question in another, or we can combine.
No, you can combine it. No, you can combine it.
Okay.
And if you need another week, go ahead and take another week. It's no problem.
Okay, yes, we will. Then let's say maybe for after 2 weeks, we will try to make Hawza together.
That sounds
Okay?
really good. That sounds really good. Okay.
Okay.
And then we'll be in this second week of June. And my personal expectation would be that we have the fatwa or the ijtihad, as the case may be, kind of ready to present in a Hawza maybe around mid-August, something like this. Okay, so you have pretty much 2 months to
I
present
think,
a
Sheikh, we
Hawza.
would need much more time.
Really? Do you think so?
Yes, yes. The idea was half a year for the theoretical side and half year for the practical side, but let's say maybe at least 3 or 4 months.
Well, it's up to you. Again,
Because
it's up to you. Yeah.
let's say if we proceed with philosophy, as
Yeah.
was the initial idea,
Yeah.
to complete the book of Henry Corbin in 4 months, and again with beta make the practical side also for 4 months, and then we can continue together the next year.
Look, I'm completely open for that. I'm completely open for that. I had this idea that we might be able to kind of fuse Islamic philosophy and Irfaniyat into kind of one kind of big module. But I'm also open if you guys say that you want to take more time and really do the work on the fatwa really properly, and you rather have, let's say, or the ijtihad, and you really want to have rather like, you know, maybe 4 months or 3 months, and then you'd like to start the module year 3 after that. So Islamic philosophy, inshallah. That's totally fine with me. But why don't we take this offline now? Because I think this is a different discussion. We
Yes,
can
yes,
settle this
I
separate,
agree.
yeah?
I agree. Okay, so for now we will try for after next weeks,
Okay.
then we will.
But
see
I
what will
appreciate
happen.
to get all the students' final theses that were from last year, please, by next Friday, inshallah, nonetheless, okay? And we try to set up the Hawza for next Sunday, and then we are finished with this subject, and you guys are basically free to proceed, inshallah, okay? But Veli, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I thought that Zayd Shia and Ismaili have the same imam, or it was, or they are two different people.
Theoretically, they can even be the same, okay? Theoretically, it can even be the same. Like I can, if I'm a believer of the Agha Khan, okay, which to be honest, I'm respectfully not a believer of the Agha Khan, but if I were, I could take him the same way I take an Ismaili imam. I could also take a Zaydi imam. It wouldn't make a difference, yeah? Even if I'm a Sunni Muslim, okay, I can decide that, you know, the Agha Khan is like some kind of ustaz, and I want to follow him like a sheikh, you know? I can even take bay'at. I mean, he can take bay'at from me if I want to give it, you know? I mean, so this is not, you know, taking someone to follow them in a certain way is not necessarily madhab specific, okay? So when I find a great teacher, you know, whether it's someone from the Ahlul Bayt or whether it's not, like let's take Sheikh Nazim again from the Haqqani Naqshbandi Sufis, you know, a lot of Sunnis were giving him bay'at and somehow following him on the spiritual Naqshbandi path. Okay, that's fine. You know, they're welcome to do that. They're Sunni Muslims. Then you had, you know, Shia guys following, for example, taking taqleed from Imam Marja, Ali Sistani, for example, or Shirazi, or many of these, you know, large Marja'i from Iraq. Okay, so you know, you could give, you know, your bay'at to them. Or in my case, I had the pleasure of meeting my Imam Sayyid Mehdi Razvi alayhi salam. So, you know, so I took him and follow him. But it's not really like finding a teacher and deciding to follow them is not really so much a question of madhab as it is a question of, you know, finding someone who can guide you and mentor you and somehow give you some spiritual guidance and some pathway to follow it. Yeah. And why I loved Imam Razvi specifically is he always said, you know, we're equal on the level of humanity. And he said, if I make a mistake, he said, I'm not Masoom, so I'm not, you know, some perfect guy or something like this. He said, if I make a mistake, you know, please, you know, criticize me and correct me, and you don't have to accept everything that I say. And this I really like, because a lot of these sheikhs and, you know, these gurus are trying to be like these big, you know, walking around like this and having all these followers, and a lot of time there's a lot of money in the game. Sometimes there's a lot of girls in the game also, yeah. And all of this nonsense really has to stop, yeah. I mean, I'm really just going to say all of this bullshit that you sometimes see in today's Sufism and in today's Islam and in spiritual traditions all over the world, it just has to kind of stop here, inshallah. And so people, if you give your bay'at, or if you give, you know, your in a sense, you decide to follow a teacher of any kind, make sure to always keep a little bit of human distance between yourself and the teacher, and make sure to critically analyze what they're teaching you and what, at the end of the day, what you're learning from them and how you're applying it. So in that sense, there are all of these kind of philosophies about, fanafil sheikh, all these things, and no, we don't do that in our generation anymore. Those generations are over. You don't have that in today's world, unfortunately. So a fanafil sheikh, if you ask my humble opinion, is not going to work. So fanafillah, dissolution of your own soul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the direct way of Islam, and there should be no intermediary, only teachers that can help you, remove the different veils and the different layers of non-comprehension, the veils of illusion, inshallah, wallahu a'lam. Any other questions? Okay.
No.
Are you coming to Bulgaria this summer?
I hope so, inshallah, brother. So thank you very much for your nice question. I hope so. So actually, my lovely wife and I, we're going to have a baby, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And if everything goes well, inshallah, then maybe at the end of July, we'll have 2 weeks that we go on a train, and we take the train from Hamburg through Czech Republic and Budapest. And maybe we have a chance to come down to Bulgaria for a couple of days and then go to Istanbul, and then we kind of go back. So if everything works out in this way, inshallah, we would love to meet all of you. Inshallah, it would be our pleasure. It would be our blessing. But as I said, it depends on the health of my wife and of the baby after the birth, inshallah. So I can't give you now 100%, but hopefully, if not this year, then maybe hopefully next year latest, or maybe during Christmas or sometime like this when everybody has a bit of free time, and we'll see what's the best way, inshallah. But we will have the Hawza all together, inshallah, in Bulgaria one day, inshallah.
As a beautiful coincidence, David and his wife are also awaiting their baby in 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, mashallah, mashallah. Allah, inshallah, healthy and happy and holy birth for you as well. Very nice.
Thanks, inshallah.
Ameen, inshallah. Everyone, so thank you very much. Let's close with a Fatiha, please, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. As-siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed our long and intense Hawza. And please, I will send you the link specifically to the recording. And I hope to see your wonderful criteria list and question for the fatwa coming very soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.